but I think there's a lot of continuity. Add that to a good second half of the season. Bolton fans are pretty optimistic.
Yeah, it's going to be a really exciting game next Saturday, isn't it? Ipswich v Bolton at Portman Rose.
And they won 5-2 last
all
time,
right,
didn't they?
Gab, yeah. Last season. Doesn't count. Hello and welcome to the Blue Monday podcast, discussing Ipswich Town up or down since 2015. I'm Richard Woodard and you're tuning into the Prematch show, available each week on podcast and video. Joining me to preview the new League One season. I kind of said it's the pre-match show, guys. It's the pre-season show, but we haven't got a dedicated branding for that. So the pre-season show, we're going to look ahead through all 24 teams with my usual pre-match show buddy Seb Brown and a special guest, EFL guru Gab Sutton. EFL guru, you happy with that, Gab?
I'll take it, mate.
Yeah, guru. Yeah, the Yoda of the EFL. This is the exciting time of the year for you, isn't it, Gab? You're doing your research and then you've got your 1 to 24s, which Seb and I will have a bash at with probably less knowledge and experience, but yours are coming out quite soon.
Yeah, Rich, I'm so excited for firstly the new season, but also the season preview that I've got coming out. If you check me out on Twitter at Gab Sutton, you can see it's pinned. The date is Tuesday, the 26th is the release, 8 o'clock for League One, where I'm sort of giving my verdict on all 24 teams in League One, including Ipswich Town. And funnily enough, I'm actually submitting it for release then this evening. So this is the last chance. You've got a big responsibility, Rich, because you could talk me into a pro Ipswich prediction, or you could talk me out of it. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, you've got. We've described ourselves as the Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill of Ipswich Town supporters, as in the bit where they start to trip in 21 Jump Street. I'm Jonah Hill.
The name Channing Tatum as an actor rings a bell, but I'm not 100%.
I'll have to share you the GIF. Either way, I'm Mr. Misery and Seb's Mr. Positivity, and ultimately neither of us end up being right. Well, I generally end up being right because we typically finish 11th, Gab. But this season, I don't think any of us are going for 11th, are we, Seb?
No, definitely not. I'm going positive, as all will be revealed, and I think you're probably going slightly less positive, but certainly compared to previous years, I think we're looking forward and excited to this one, aren't we? It could be a really, really good season. And great to have Gab with us to add some proper credibility, because normally the pre-match show is you and me just discussing stuff, and then we finish the recording and we find out what we got wrong and who's left clubs and who doesn't play in what positions. But thankfully, like you said, we've got a bona fide EFL guru here to help us through this week. So great to have Gab with us.
Well, yeah, but it's also great from my point of view to sort of lean on fans and get their sort of more sort of tailored views on individual teams. So I think I can take a lot from this as well. So great to be on and looking forward to getting started.
Oh, cheers, Gab. Yeah, thanks for joining us, as Seb says. Let's start with Ipswich then. We've talked plenty, obviously, on the Blue Monday podcast about Ipswich Town. Let's get a neutral perspective, a third-party view. You're quite active on Twitter. I'm sure you get plenty of opinions when we make signings or when players leave Ipswich and go somewhere else. But what's your take on Ipswich? You don't need to give us a league position, but your position on our strength and well, we might need improvement, perhaps.
Sure. Well, I'm going to kind of break it down into a few sort of sections in terms. We know Kieran McKenna is a really good coach. I think pretty much the whole Town fan base is pretty set on that. I think defensively, there's clearly been a huge improvement. 13 goals conceded in 24 under his guidance is astonishing, really. So I'm pretty confident the defence is going to be strong. Last season, under McKenna, you created a lot of chances, but maybe didn't put them away. I kind of wonder if there might be a bit more reverse of that this year, because I like the strikers that you brought in and I expect you to be a little bit more clinical this year. But I'm also not sure about what sort of impact losing Burton Salina is going to have on that creative output. So I reckon there could be a little bit of a reverse between those two areas. But if you can get the creative aspect right, then I think you could go really, really strong.
Can't believe Sebby's Gab's mentioned the C word already, and we're only not even a couple of minutes in.
Yeah, well, there'll be another C word coming up.
Well, I mean that's now becoming a debacle and a saga, Gab. So it's not impossible that Salina ends up back at Portman Road next season, but at the moment, this is kind of a no Selena transferred speculation area, from at least for me. Other members of the team might feel differently, but interesting your thoughts on the role reversal there. Any insights or thoughts on Tyrese John-Jules or Freddie Ladapo from you watching other clubs last season?
Yeah, I think Tyrese John-Jules is a really explosive striker, very highly rated at youth level. I think he's going to bring loads of pace, and hopefully he can add goals to that. I think Caden Jackson could come good this year. Freddie Ladapo is very much a poacher in the right system. I think you give him a chance, and I think he'll finish it. And you're also possibly in the market for a back-to-goal striker. I've seen George Hurst linked, and he did very well in the second half of last season at Portsmouth. So I'm actually quite confident, although your conversion rate wasn't great under McKenna, I'm pretty confident that you're going to get that right this time around.
And I guess the most recent signing through the door is Marcus Harness. Any thoughts on him? And obviously for Portsmouth, very much a right winger, and we've clearly got Wes Burns, who's done very well under both Paul Cook and Kieran McKenna, frankly. Your thoughts on where we might see him, if not a right wing, possibly somewhere else? Your thoughts on that signing?
Sure. I think I'm a little bit concerned that a lot of Town fans see Marcus Harness as a replacement for Selena, because I don't know if he's quite going to have the consistency for that. I don't feel like a lot of Portsmouth fans see Marcus Harness as someone that's going to be irreplaceable. He had some really good games last year, of course. But yeah, I'm not sure he's going to quite have the consistency that you need. And I'm also just slightly conscious, Rich, and really intrigued to get both of your views on this. If it's going to be a 3-4-3 for Ipswich this season, you've got Don Ball, who's quite a destructive midfielder, predominantly. Sam Morsey, who's a bit of an all-rounder, but they're going to have to keep a lid on the midfield because the wing-backs are going to be so high up. Hopefully you can get in a left wing-back that can do something similar to Wes Burns on the right. But that, I feel, if the midfielders are going to do that, I feel Ipswich need someone who can just bring that sprinkling of genius in that front three, and that creative element, as I mentioned before. And I don't know if I see that necessarily. I think that you're probably going to have to spread the creativity out. That may work, but I just feel there is that one piece that's missing a little bit.
So do you agree with that?
A little bit. I mean, yeah, at the moment in the current formation, I guess we'll be looking at the likes of Sonny Aluko and Connor Chaplin to sort of provide the ammunition for the strikers. Now, Aluko's close control is brilliant. His awareness is brilliant. His touch is fantastic, but he is 32, 33, so he's not going to be relied upon all season to do the business. Connor Chaplin's a player I really, really like. Obviously, he joined us from Barnsley, where he played more as a traditional kind of striker, but he's kind of dropped deeper in his time at Ipswich, and I think this will be a really, really big season for him. He did decently last year, I thought. He didn't start as many games as he probably wanted to and still finished with 10 to 11 goals. But I know what you're saying, but when Selena rejoins at the end of next week, it'll all be fine. Don't worry about it.
No pressure there. Well, let's any other questions or thoughts on Ipswich Town before we move on, guys?
Well, I think that's pretty much covered it. I think probably bringing in another left wing back is going to be quite key. I don't mind the signing of Greg Lee, because I think part of the reason he left was more him not being likely to accept a new contract as Morecambe, as opposed to him being released by them, although that's what it looks like on paper. So I think he'll be a good squad player, but I'd probably want to be looking at another option. And if you can bring in someone who can really bring a little bit of quality to take some of the attention off Wes Burns, he does such a good job, doesn't he, on the right, then I think that could go a long way.
Good stuff, Gab. Thanks for that. Some really good insights. Let's start, shall we, the rest of League One. Let's do it in alphabetical order. Let's start with Accrington Stanley, guys. Who are they exactly?
I bet you're wishing you don't know who they are, given your trips to
that's the marker, isn't it? I think the first two seasons down, it was all going brilliantly till we went to Accrington away, which normally tends to be around mid-October or mid to late October, and things start to go very, very badly from that point onwards. So it's always an outlier as the potential start of the horrible run. Hopefully that won't be the case this year.
Yeah, we've had some miserable trips to Accrington, and Seb and I went there and were knocked out of the FA Cup the season before we got relegated, or the season we got relegated in as well. So plenty of terrible memories there. But gents, I would suggest a lot weaker than where they were last season. Ross Sykes has left. Colby Bishop, the day we record this Thursday, he's just signed for Portsmouth. Matt Butcher's off to Plymouth. John O'Sullivan, also a handy midfield player, has left for Bohemians in Ireland. And Sean Wally's come in from Shrewsbury on a free, Gab. Weaker than last year?
I think I'm going to have a real dilemma when it comes to calling Accrington Stanley, because on the one hand, they've got two brilliant managers they've got two brilliant people in John Coleman and Jimmy Bell, who have just delivered season on season well above the budgetary rank. And I think really the challenge for me is how much stock do you put in that? Probably quite a lot, I'd suggest. But you don't want to get to the point where you just say Coleman's there and it'll all be fine, because squad-wise, I think you're right to say that they're a little bit weaker than last season. They conceded 80 goals, probably not going to have an awful lot of experience in the defence. But there is that feeling that John Coleman can just get the best out of his resources. He does it season on season, so it's balancing those two things, really.
Seb, any thoughts there? I guess the big question I've got for Accrington is where are the goals going to come from?
Yeah, I mean, they'll be very reliant on Sean McConville to provide all the assists again, won't it? I think he get 16, 17 assists last year, but he is a year older now. He must be 33, 34 maybe at the start of the season. So they'll be reliant on him again to provide the ammunition. But yeah, like you say, with Bishop going, I'm not entirely sure where those goals are going to come from. But I don't think they'll go down simply because of John Coleman. So experienced at this level, he knows what he's doing, and I think they'll ultimately be okay. But it might be a bit of a struggle for them this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And we need to caveat I should have said this right at the top, is there's still plenty of time left in the window, isn't there? And I think there's this sense that Premier League teams are, we are assuming that we are in for George Hurst at the moment. There's a lot of chat of that being the case. And it feels like Premier League teams making decisions as late as possible in the window as they can. Suddenly, lots of business will happen towards the end of the window. Is that the sense you're getting, Gab?
Yeah, I think so. I think that what we saw last season was that Premier League loans did really well last year. And I think the thing with them is that Premier League clubs want, to get a look at these lads in their pre-season tours. So Wickham, for example, got Nathan Bishop on loan from Manchester United, but he's not actually joining until the week leading up to the season, because United wanted to get a look at him in Australia. So I think you're seeing a few instances like that, and then it's these loan players that could make a real difference that become available at late notice. So a lot of clubs are having this dilemma of, on the one hand, we could stock up early and make sure that we've got all our parts in place and we're ready to go into the season. Or do we take the wild card option and take the chance that a top loan becomes available at late notice?
The old waiting game. Let's move on to Barnsley next. Newly relegated Barnsley. Seb, what's your take on Barnsley?
I think it might be a bit of a transition season for them. Obviously, last year was really poor. We know they've brought in Mr. Norwood, who's going to have a couple of fun games against us this season. He's obviously late to the party in terms of pre-season. I think we know what that tends to mean for him, but he looks like he's in pretty good shape with his personal fitness regimes on Instagram and stuff. So they'll be very reliant on him to score the goals because of the players they've lost. Having lost Woodrow and Morris to Luton, who's going to score those goals for them? They need Norwood to stay fit and probably deliver them sort of 15 goals or so to make sure that they kind of are maybe challenging the top six, but I think they'll finish a bit short this season. I think Duff's a good appointment. I think it's a sensible appointment. Did really pretty well with Cheltenham sort of last year, and Cadden's a good buy as well from Forest Green, the left back. He'll certainly provide ammunition for Norwood, but they need to keep him fit and get him involved.
Gab, your thoughts on Michael Duff?
Yeah, I agree with what a lot of Seb said there, and I think Michael Duff, he's just done it consistently with Cheltenham. They've broken records, first ever EFL title, highest ever finish. He likes that 3-5-2 system, and Cheltenham played some really good football at times last season as well. So I'm expecting him to go well, and I think it's a cracking appointment as Barnsley look to rebuild after a tough season last year, of course.
Yeah, Barnsley were a difficult one for me when it comes to our 1-24s. A difficult one to think about, and I kind of, because of that kind of state of flux that Seb talked about, I think probably that having been a team that's gone through that, certainly this time last year, a lot more upheaval at Portman Road, and that to me tends to, I think, yes, scupper teams particularly early on, and suddenly if it clicks, great. But I think there's probably a bit too much work to do there. And again, I'm wondering where are the goals going to come from? If it's Norwood, great, but we know that Norwood kind of sometimes plays a little bit hot and cold. He's going to work really hard. But I just wonder whether there's anyone else there who's going to get the kind of 15, 20 goals that gets them into the top 6. Or
he hit 29 though at Tranmere a few seasons ago in League 2. So I think if you give him the ball around the edge of the box and he's confident and motivated in the right headspace, there is that potential for him to do some damage.
Yep, and he will inevitably score against us. When he said
that's a given, Rich.
Yeah, well, it's a given for most players who leave Ipswich as well. Thank goodness Joe Pigott loan presumably prevents him from playing against us. Next up, Bolton, guys. This is a real interesting one, isn't it? Seb, you look like you want to say something about Bolton.
No, I think they'll be strong this year. They finished last year really, really well. Not been overly busy in the market, have they? They've bought in the left back from Cambridge, Jack Airedale on a free transfer, and James Trafford on loan from Man City, the goalkeeper. So not overly busy so far. We've still got obviously a bit of time to go in the window, but I think they'll be strong. I really like the manager. I think they finished last year really, really well, and I think that's going to be a tricky opening game at Portman Road next week.
Yeah,
I think it's just picking up on what Seb said about not too many signings. I think he's right to sort of point that out, but also I think the fact that they finished last season so well, and the fact that they've not really lost too many players apart from Marlon Fossey, who's on loan. They replaced him with a lad called Connor Bradley, who's at Liverpool, I think, and he's played 8 times for Ireland at 18, so whether he can step up. But I think there's a lot of continuity. Add that to a good second half of the season. Bolton fans are pretty optimistic.
Yeah, it's going to be a really exciting game next Saturday, isn't it? Ipswich v Bolton at Portman Road. And
they won 5-2 last
time.
Right,
Gab, yeah. Last season doesn't count. We beat them 5-3 in the playoffs in 2000. Gab, how about that?
They've never really recovered from that, have they?
No, the Barry Knight derby, as we like to call it. I think Bolton are strong on there. I think Seb's right to talk about their form. I think they were in the top 4 in terms of the last 6 games played, in terms of points earned. They've done really well. Ian Evatt, though, guys, he's always in the news, isn't he, about something? He's training his players in 38-degree heat last week, isn't he? Is there a little bit of, I don't know, is there's, I don't want to use the word dysfunction, but something about Ian Evatt, there's a bit of chatter there.
There's a little bit of arrogance about him, isn't there? But I think that, and I think that can rub a few people up the wrong way. But I also think that he's one of those where if he was Ipswich manager, you'd be singing his name. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's that arrogance that you hate if he's an opposition manager, but sometimes you can it gets your juices flowing if he's your own manager. So that would be my take on that one.
That's fair point, Gab. Yeah, and we know about Dion Charles, we know about Offline as well. So they'll be strong. Talking about managers with arrogance, and he likes to be in the press. Bristol Rovers up next, and Joey Barton. Gab, your thoughts on newly promoted Bristol Rovers? Some experienced players have left, which I guess isn't necessarily a surprise because a lot of them well over 30. If we look at Glenn Whelan and Leon Clark, Brett Pittman as well was there.
I think actually, Rich, the bigger one is probably the loanees, because they had Elliot Anderson was the one on loan from Newcastle that made such a difference to their season. They also got a couple of centre-backs on loan called James Connolly and Conor Taylor. Connolly they've got back, Taylor they haven't, nor have they got Anderson back. So I think that would be a slight concern given the importance those players were to the promotion. But I think John Marquis is a good signing. I think he's someone who can be a focal point, who can bring the likes of your Anthony Evanses and your Aaron Collinses in. So I'm really intrigued to see how they get on after being one of the form sides of the country in the second half of last season.
Yeah, and Joey Barton's got experience at this level, hasn't he, Seb?
Obviously he took Fleetwood into the playoffs, wasn't it? In the COVID curtailed season, they finished in the playoffs, so he did a decent job there. And I think we were all a bit surprised when he moved down to Bristol, but the job he did last season, that run they went on, and then that incredible last day, when they had to hit a certain number, was it 7 they had to win by or something to go up, and they managed to do it. And like Gab said, the big loss is Elliot Anderson. They've got to replace those 13 goal contributions from last season. But John Marquis is pretty experienced at this level, so he'll look to lead the line and chip in here and there. And Barton should have just about enough to keep them above water, I think.
Yeah, maybe lacking quality outside the starting 11 a little bit. Maybe more strength and depth needed there. But yeah, it'll be interesting with Bristol Rovers. I've got a soft spot for Bristol Rovers. So yeah, let's see about them. A team that up next, guys, Burton, who under Hasselbank kind of are very kind of spiky in terms of, or patchy in terms of their form. Finished 16th last season. And Guy, I don't know who wants to jump in here. I don't see them as being much stronger than they were last season.
Yeah, I mean, I just sort of like to sort of make a quick shout out. They've got a goalkeeper called Viljami Sinisalo on loan from Aston Villa, and a year ago he was on loan somewhere in Scotland, and he was talked about as one of the best goalkeepers in Europe of his age group. So I think, and Villa gave him a 3-year contract this summer, so that shows what they think of him. I'm not sure quite what I think of Burton as a side. I think they have their limitations, but as a goalkeeper, I think he's one who could really thrive and give them a few smash and grabs. And it's how far that could take them, I think, is the big question, really.
Yeah,
do we know if Joe Powell's still there? Joe Powell's in contract talks. Is he still there?
Signed a new deal. Yeah.
Okay, so that's pretty crucial to their business. And they signed the guy from Oldham, Keller Dunn, who scored against us in the FA Cup back in December. I thought he looked okay at the time, so I guess they'll be looking at him to score the goals. But yeah, if they kept Joe Powell, that's a big boost for them, isn't it?
Yeah, I think as a lot of the teams we talked about, I'm kind of looking at the strikers and thinking who's going to score the goals. Victor Adebayo, from Barnsley, signed, but I'm just not sure the goals are there for them. And Hasselbank, to me, big Premier League star, some 15 years ago, wasn't it? 20 years ago. I just wonder whether either he's reached his ceiling with them, or maybe this is kind of par for Burton. I'm not sure they'll be in any relegation danger. We recall, the amazing run they went on 2 seasons ago to kind of get themselves out of trouble under Hasselbank, but maybe kind of mid-table League One is kind of the level for Burton. Maybe we shouldn't be expecting too much more from them. Who knows? Cambridge up next, guys. Is it too simplistic, Gab, to talk about Ironside when we talk about Cambridge? Or you're friends with Mark Bonner? Is he feeling optimistic?
I've had him on the show once.
Wow.
Practically went to school together, didn't we? No, I think he's a really exciting young manager. He's quite. Do you know? I'll tell you this. One of the questions I asked about him when you I don't know if either of you can imagine managing Ipswich Town and sort of how do you reconcile being a supporter of the club, but also having to have that sort of calm, composed sort of element. And I asked Mark Bonner about how he kind of reconciles those two things, and his answer was, "I'm not a fan anymore," which sort of seemed like a really blunt thing to say, but actually when you kind of absorb it, it's actually brings a bit of clarity, because he's quite open about the fact that there are certain things that he can't be, that you can't be a fan that's emotional, that's biased, that's ardent in favor of certain things, and also be this methodical strategist, if you like. And it's just really interesting to hear him say that. So I really rate Mark Bonner, and they've kept a lot of the squad from last season still in place, so not much turnover at all. Intrigued to see how things go there in their second season at this level for about 20 years.
Yeah, and Brophy's still there as well, and some interesting players brought in, as in names that are not familiar from me, and signings from Kilmarnock and from overseas. And
tell you what though, Rich, they've got a lad called Zeno Ibsen Rossi who was very close to breaking into the Bournemouth side before they added Gary Cahill, and it became harder for him. So I think that's a really exciting signing.
Do you know what? should cut this out, but I'll keep it in. I've made a typo on Bournemouth, and I assumed that I'd written a team from something like Belgium or somewhere. So he's the overseas signing that I didn't recognise. He's from Bournemouth. I missed out a U. So there you go, Rusty. I'd got there. I guess my two worries for Cambridge. The first is they kind of got safe, and they beat us at Portman Road, deservingly so, and then kind of packed up a little bit. The job of getting safe in League One was done, and their form really dropped off towards the end of the season. So that's something in terms of what I would expect Mark Bonner to be working on. You need to sustain that, and that gives you a chance of top half, which I think would be a really good finish for them this season, and then maybe even further. Who knows, with the right investment. The other, I guess, issue, Seb, and it's something that we probably all Ipswich Town fans stay awake at night a little bit worrying about, is does someone come in for Mark Bonner?
Yeah, potentially. Was it not the top 20 did that sort of thing about young coaches in the EFL, and he was very much listed along with Kieran McKenna, wasn't he? Yeah, he's a great coach, great manager. I guess they might suffer a bit of second season syndrome at this level. One player I do like, we've not mentioned yet, is that Sam Smith as well. He kind of takes some of the goal scoring burden off of Ironside. I quite like him. I think he got 15 or 14 or something last year, so he can chip in as well. But yeah, I mean, if we get to just before the World Cup and there's a team struggling, they might Cambridge are struggling, and a team higher up the pyramid is sniffing around for a new manager. He's very highly rated, and I guess they could come and make a move for him.
Just kind of throwing you onto a sort of just exploring this point with both of you. How much stock do you two put when looking at teams? Do you put in they've had a good season or a good second half of the season, and they've kept most of the squad in place? Because sometimes we look at these exciting new signings that all kind of roll off the tongue, and they've all come in, and that's going to lift them up. But sometimes actually having that bit of cohesion, that bit of synergy in a group, that can make a bit of a difference. So I'd be really interested to hear either of your thoughts on that.
Absolutely agree. I mean, Christ, would we bring in 19 new players last year? And, we kept hearing every single week, this team needs to gel, this team needs to gel. I think the evolution as opposed to revolution we've done this season is going to be much, much more favourable when the season starts, because I think on the first day of pre-season last year, we had like 6 players in the building, and, people didn't know who they were. And then interviews come out halfway through the season where people say there's no natural leaders in the dressing room. So I personally am a big believer in continuity and looking to build. It's what we were so good at back in the late 90s. We had a core of a good team, and every year we would maybe sell somebody and bring in a couple of bits of quality, add bits here and there. And I think that continuity and that's kind of evolution year on year is absolutely vital. I don't personally look at sides that bring in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 new players with maybe a star name amongst them. I always think to myself, I'd personally rather that bit of continuity and that bit of know-how from a bit of cohesion. We have Harry from Bath used to do our pre-season preview shows, and he coined the term covalent bonds between footballers, and it's a term we refer back to so many times, and it's so critical to how teams function these days.
So it's partnerships, Gab, isn't it? And I think McKenna is a really good example, and there are others in League One as well who came into their roles partway through last season, and actually they need a pre-season to get their kind of feet under the table, as it were, as well. There are a lot of managers. We'll talk about Wickham. We've already talked about John Common, who've been around for quite a while. I think those are the managers who maybe struggle to keep the player. They've got continuity. They haven't had the churn. But how do you excite and motivate those players when it's so familiar? Whereas McKenna, I think, is an example of a manager. Danny Cowley, to a lesser extent, maybe. I'm sure we'll come up with some of them as we go through, who have had a big chunk of a season and got in some of their ideas over really quickly, and now over the pre-season, they've got a squad they're happy with for a start, but can just do that sharing of understanding it, the ideas, get to know the players a little bit better as well. And, Seb said, I'm hopeful it's going to stand us in really good stead. And there'll be others in League One. I'll point them out that will be similar. But yeah, it's a great point. Talking on the opposite side of the spectrum, let's talk about Charlton, who've basically recruited Swindon on the back of their pretty successful League Two campaign, which ended up in defeat in the playoffs. 3 players brought in from Swindon, Wallacott, Egbo and Jack Payne. Gab, how do you see this kind of working out? Ben Garner obviously recruited as manager as well. We were maybe a bit surprised to see Johnny Jackson go, but talk us through your thoughts on Charlton.
So I feel quite conflicted on Charlton, because I think on the one hand, this is a club with a bit of a point to prove. I think that Thomas Sandgaard's got the investment, he's got the ambition to take the club forward. I think that the club is lacking a little bit in terms of strategic guidance in terms of how to get there, and sometimes that's a little bit of a concern for me. That said, I do like the appointment of Garner. I think he's going to try and make them a very possession-heavy side this year. I like some of the recruitment as well. Ewan O'Connell from Rochdale, the centre-back, I've liked for a while, yeah. Conor McGrandles they got from Lincoln. Jack Payne they got from Swindon as well. So I'd like some of the signings, and I like the manager appointment. I think that they're, as a club, probably going to be targeting the top 6, but it's going to be so competitive this year, isn't it?
It is, and there's a changing of the guard gone on there. A lot of players out as well. Only 3 transfers so far. Steven Sessegnon from Fulham at right back on loan is a decent signing, but Adam Matthews is gone. Connor Washington's gone to Rotherham. Chris Gunter popped up at AFC Wimbledon. Ben Watson, obviously getting on a little bit, but experience there. So clearly a strategic review of their recruitment and the age of the squad there a factor as our contract's expiring. But it's always weird, Seb, to see a team like Charlton, struggling in League One, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they were the poster boy, weren't they, for so many years of how to run a football club, and they got themselves promoted, came back down, went back to the Premier League the same year that we did by winning the league, and they were a Premier League stable, weren't they? They were always there, and they were so well run, and they've just had horrendous things with owners go on over the years, haven't they? And that's why they are where they are. It's a lot of experience. You just listed some names there. That's a lot of experience to leave the dressing room. I understand they're trying to do a revamp and a make up the squad differently, but that could come to bite them, because sometimes you just need that bit of experience in the dressing room, don't you, to put an arm around players and to give guidance and knowledge. We've seen how important Aluko's been for doing that, and a lot of names you've mentioned there leaving, I think, will hurt them.
Yeah, I mean, well, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed for Scott Fraser to prove us all wrong as well. I'm not letting go of that one, guys. But moving on, Cheltenham. Wade Elliott in here, Gab. Post Mike Duff.
It's going to be obvious. It's going to be difficult for them without Michael Duff, given what he's achieved and who's such a big part of their rise. I think sometimes when this sort of thing happens, you want to try and remember it's the club that's achieved the things that they've achieved over the last few years, and not necessarily just the manager. And I think that it's fair for Cheltenham fans to say, well, we're not going to fall apart. I think on the flip side, they've lost some important players who were part of that rise. They lost defender Will Boyle. They've lost Callum Wright. Kian Atete was really good in the second half of the season. We don't know what's going to happen with Alfie May, whether he'll get some late interest. He scored 23 goals in the league alone last season. So I think there's going to be some challenges ahead. A lot of Cheltenham fans seem to think that they'll be in the kind of 16th to 19th sort of bracket. So it'll be interesting to see how things pan out. But I think it'll be a challenging season for them.
And Wade Elliott's been around as well. He's got some experience coaching, but first time I think he might have been a caretaker manager a couple of times. I think at Bristol City perhaps, but big pressure on him. And I also picked out Alfie May as well as someone who's going to feel the pressure, I think, of trying to fire the goals for them. Where do we go next, guys? We have to talk about Derby. I mean, crazy situation, Seb. And after a kind of a will they or will they not even be able to turn up and compete in the league, quite a shitload of recruitment.
Yeah, it's going to be Dad's Army babysitting some real young talent, isn't it? They're sort of going for both ends of the spectrum. They've signed some players which in theory on paper should be very good at this level. Collins I think will score goals, Barkhausen will score goals, McGoldrick will create. Hurahan is a bit of a cheat code at this level in midfield, I would suggest. And at the back, they've got Chester kind of tight all together. And then I guess they're not done yet. There'll still be some more coming in. I think they might do all right. Personally, I know a lot of people saying maybe mid-table and stuff, but I think Pride Park sold out every week will help things. I think Rosinia's a good coach who I hope does well. I know they've released that statement saying he'll carry on as an interim manager for now, which is kind of a, watch this space. We might bin him off if things start to go badly a couple of months into the season.
But I think they'll do all right. I think Pride Park will become a bit of a fortress for them, and I think the players they're signing will mean that they are sort of there or thereabouts with the top 6 personally.
I think what we've kind of got to be careful of when judging Derby is not just looking at the names they brought in and going tick, 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 because I think a lot of these players were really good Championship players 5 years ago. They might still be good for League One, but I don't necessarily see that as a guarantee, because some of them might be getting on a little bit, and there's going to be some fresher legs coming into League One. And then do you look at Derby in terms of the academy? Now, Derby have got a really good academy, but what's that balance between, and I think Seb was quite right to sort of touch on this, there isn't too many PKH performers. It's kind of the masters teaching the apprentices with not too many PhD studiers, if you like. So I think that would be the one question mark for Derby. It looks good on paper. Is it going to turn out on the pitch?
And a lot of churn. We've spoken about this, isn't it? And I hate to say it, but there is some dysfunction about Derby off the field as well, which never seems to go away. So you kind of hope this is just a settling season where maybe they, make a late dash perhaps for the playoffs, but a lot of expectation and probably undue expectation on Liam Rossini. I think we wish him all the very best there. Next up, Exeter. Gab, you need to talk to us about Exeter. I'm a bit worried about Exeter.
I think a lot of fans might feel the same as you, because they've not made any signings. And from my perspective, I'm always a little bit careful not to base it too much on that, because would you look at Exeter more favourably if they had released another 5 players and they brought another 5 players in? Do you know what I mean? Because they've got more coming in, as opposed to they've retained their key assets. So they've got players like Josh Key. You may have come across him because he's been, one that sort of upper League One clubs have been sort of linked with. They kept hold of him so far. Giovanni Brown and Matt Jay are their 2 creative sparks in attacking midfield. They've got some really talented defenders as well. Cheek Diabate, Alex Hartridge, Sam Stubbs as well. And I think that's the thing for Exeter. They've kept hold of much of their squad. Apart from the goalkeeper, really, Cameron Dawson, it looks like they're going to bring in a lad called Alex Bath from Portsmouth to replace Dawson. We'll see how that goes. Probably want to bring in another striker as well. But I think that although the recruitment has been slow and they haven't brought in many players, they've also maybe not needed to. And I think that can be worth bearing in mind.
Yeah, I picked out Matt Jay, but I'm just worried that because they were quite the lowest of the 3 automatic teams in terms of goals for. I just worry about that. Again, pressure on Matt Jay. It's quite a small squad, but still plenty of time. So
Matt Jay actually went something like 15 games without a goal at one point last season as well. So yeah, I can see your point there.
Seb, next up, Fleetwood. If we were to pick maybe of the teams that have surprised us in terms of the quality of their recruitment, Fleetwood would be up there, wouldn't they?
Yeah, them and Shrewsbury for me are the ones that have done decent business. Callum Morton's a cracking signing from West Brom. Josh Earl's added sort of Championship level experience. Obviously, we know him from his brief time at Ipswich. But I guess the unknown quantity about them is the management, isn't it? Is Scott Brown? How's he going to do? Is he going to be a Roy Keane and get frustrated with kind of players that are way below what he's used to, or is he going to galvanise the team and move forward? That's the big question for me. But Callum Morton is a cracking signing, I think.
Well, Roy Keane in his first season in management won a title, so
true. Yeah, I refer to when he came to us and it all started to go very, very wrong very quickly.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on the recruitment there, Gab? You think expectations at Fleetwood, because obviously they just avoided relegation, didn't they, last season?
I think there's been a very clear strategy in terms of youthful exuberance, energy, players that are either teenagers or in their sort of early 20s bracket. And I think many people could look at that and say, are they going to have the experience to deal with a dogfight? Are they going to have the proven quality? I think that's a valid question. Equally, I think that there's something sort of wildly unpredictable about the energy that they bring. I think they're going to look at a high pressing template. They've got a manager that's been a serial winner in his playing career. Are they going to actually rough up a few teams and actually surprise a few by sort of being that intense? We talk about sort of experienced midfielders like a Derby, Conor Hourihane, and we think these 33-year-olds are going to be good. But then actually, if you've got this Fleetwood side that's really going to go after them with high energy, high octane type of football, could that surprise a few people? They've got a point to prove because they finished with 40 points last season. That was the lowest tally from memory to stay up at this level since Hull in 1979-80. I've got that stat in there for you. So they've got a point to prove, but I do like the recruitment, and I think Seb's right to point that out.
Yeah. Next up, Forest Green, kind of in similar mode to Cheltenham, reeling, or maybe not, from the departure of kind of a focal point manager. Rob Edwards off to Watford. Ian Birchnell's come in. He's got some good kind of pedigree actually as a coach, and some good signings. I like David Davies. He's kind of combative central midfielder. Harry Boyce from Sheffield United on loan. Reece Brown has returned from Huddersfield.
I saw Harry Boyes actually. I was covering a Solihull Moors game last season, and Harry Boyes looked really good. So I would actually back him to step up. He's got a really good engine, and he's a very technical player as well. So although Nicky Carlton is a loss, I'm quite excited to see Harry Boyes gets on. I think he could have a good season and maybe edge his way towards the Sheffield United contention.
Any thoughts on Forest Green more generally? It's their first time at this level, but a forward-thinking club off the field certainly.
Sure,
but yeah, obviously Rob Edwards a big loss.
Yeah, Edwards is a big loss. I always, whenever they've got a director of football called Richard Hughes, who's very big in terms of strategy, in terms of continuity. And although they've lost some really important personnel, Rob Edwards, they've also lost Ebou Adams, really important player in midfield. Kane Wilson has gone to Bristol City. Nicky Carlton, Seb mentioned earlier, has gone to Barnsley. These are really big players. But I also think that they've replaced them quite quickly, quite smoothly with similar types of players now. And even the head coach, it's similar. It's Ian Birchnell. He's got a similar sort of way of working. So even if the quality isn't as there in the same way, the system that got them promoted, the sort of synergy, if you like, I still think that's going to be in place. I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of structural disruption. So yes, they've lost some quality, but I don't think that's going to destroy them necessarily.
Interesting to see. Obviously, yeah, first time at this level, but I agree with you. There's something similar to MK, who we're going to speak about in a second, where you kind of feel the manager is maybe not as important as maybe he is at other clubs.
Well, just on that, actually, if we can have a quick detour on that, I think sporting directors of football, head of whatever you want to call it, I think those types of figures in football are going to become just considered just as important as managers or head coaches in a few years' time, because I think clubs are starting to see the importance of separating who's doing the work on the grass, who's doing the coaching side of things, and who's overseeing the operation. I think those two things are equally important, and I think that the smart clubs are going to cotton on to that.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a trajectory there, isn't there? And the type of recruitment as well. Let's talk about Lincoln. Just dovetails really neatly. Have brought in Mark Kennedy, Seb, who's familiar to listeners to this podcast. Is that quite a forward-thinking type appointment along similar lines to what Gab is talking about?
I think so, yeah. He was highly rated at us, wasn't he? Was he our under-23s manager, and then he got pinched by Man City to go and do the same job, and he seems to have done well for himself. So I think it's a decent appointment. I guess I've lost the name. What's the name of the guy he replaced? Was there for ages?
Appleton.
Obviously, Appleton was there for a while, so it's a bit of a revamp for them. I think it'll be another year of sort of kind of mid-table, maybe lower mid-table. They'll be relying on Anthony Scully to deliver. Now they've lost John Marquis. I noticed the EADD did like an article article about turnover, and they've lost 39% of their players who've left started games last season, which to me was quite a high figure. And I think they might just need this season a bit of a transition one. But I think Kennedy's a good appointment, and I'm really hoping he does well, because I've always liked him as a coach. I've sort of kept an eye on him since he left Ipswich, and he's always seemed to do well for himself.
And a couple of players signed from Bradford, Gab, Vernon, and O'Connor. Yeah, any thoughts on those guys?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily blown away by their recruitment so far. I think Vernon and O'Connor are good League Two players. I'm not convinced about them in League One, but I think Seb's assessment was pretty much in tune with how a lot of Lincoln City fans are thinking about this season. It's been such a meteoric rise for Lincoln over the last 5-6 years. It's been a bit of a whirlwind, really, and I think they're getting to a place where they're just looking to sell down a bit, if you like, stabilise at this level. And I think a lot of Lincoln City fans are thinking similar. They finished 17th last season, and I think even an incremental improvement on that, whilst developing some of the younger lads they got. They brought in a lad called Danny Mandrew, who scored 22 goals in 32 games in the League of Ireland, 52 and 53 for Shamrock Rovers from midfield as well, so he can hit them. It's developing players like that whilst improving a little bit in terms of league performance. I think that's probably what Lincoln City as a club is going to be looking for.
The business of evolution, not revolution, is setting us in good stead. If we bring in Hurst, Davis and the C word, surely you'd be tipping us for automatic.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, but I just remember 38 years of Hurst, pretty much.